Hey everybody, this is Politics with Avi, and I'm Avi. Today's show we'll be talking about one of the first essays that I had ever written. This essay is on the topic of General Thucydides. I wrote this essay about probably 10 years ago. It was in the first year of my bachelor's degree program in the London School of Economics and Political Science. Critically examine the relevance of any of the following 5 thinkers about international politics today: Thucydides, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Grotius, and Marx. This was the original question that we had been given during my first year of studies. Hence, this is my essay that I had wrote. Classical theorists such as Thucydides, Hobbes, Marx, Machiavelli, and Grotius are responsible for the understanding of international politics today due to their publications and research that have been influencing people's thoughts since their origination. Each theorist has contributed to the field in a very different way. Thucydides wrote in the 1400s BC. He gives the world the foundations for realism by having written his thorough account of the Peloponnesian War. Machiavelli is considered one of the most brilliant yet controversial authors of all times. His works, The Prince and The Discourse, provide requirements for the maintenance of political stability in 2 different regimes, as well as offer counsel to political leaders. Hobbes, for example, has written about the state of nature and has been the precursor of the modern rational choice model for politics. Grotius has written about international law, thus assisting the creation of nowadays international institutions. Marx, who has written later than the above stated, has contributed in many spheres and to many concepts such as historical materialism, ideology, concepts of capitalist classes, surplus value, etc. All are still relevant today due to their predominantly economic focus. The main focus of this essay will be Thucydides, General Thucydides to be exact. He seems to be the thinker who has contributed the most to the understanding of modern international politics by providing his realist doctrine. His realist perspective is relevant since it gives insight to the anarchic world of today that lacks an overarching authority that ought to rule the international sphere and create order. Thucydides focuses on concepts such as human nature, interest versus justice, and the structural influence of the international system on the city-states from a realist perspective. According to Thucydides, General Thucydides, human nature had become wild and uncontrollable, also having some deception and ill cause. Thucydides saw human nature as being limited and humans incapable of predicting events. He thought that the common man not ought to be trusted with running a government, and that is why he should be guided, trained, and a record of what has happened should be kept for him, so he could go back to it as a reminder. Even though this is so, General Thucydides believed that the common man should have a say in what the city decides. This is depicted in the stress he places on Pericles' speeches in Athens and the necessity of the citizens' approval and backing of his intended actions. A man in Pericles' position had to be someone who could control himself and others and lack deception and ill cause. Thucydides' writing and analysis of the human nature is very relevant today to the democratic regime, thus making it directly related to international politics as well. Thucydides wrote about the concept of interest overpowering justice, an example of which is the Melian dialogue. The Athenians had stated that justice can only be among equals, and the Melians were not equal to Athens, since they were a small, weak island. This is in the interest of the weak to yell to the strong, is what the Athenians proclaimed to the Melians when trying to convince them to side with them instead of being destroyed, since neutrality would not be an option for the Melians. The Melians refused to take side in the conflict between Sparta and Athens anyway, and especially refused to join Athens' side. This occurred predominantly because the Melians believed that, although not officially with Sparta, Sparta would protect them due to historical relations between the two, and because it would be dishonorable if they did not resist the pressure posed by the Athenians. Once the Melians refused to join Athens, though, Athens protected its interest to be known as powerful, thus destroying the Melians. A couple of centuries later, Niccolò Machiavelli also writes of a similar idea, it being that it is better to be feared than loved in reference to creating domestic stability, as what Athens was doing more or less for itself. The Melian dialogue is similar to the situation that occurred between Cuba, the US, and the Soviet Union. During the Cold War conflict, Cuba wished to ally with the US, but the US refused since it was not of their interest. Cuba was thought of as insignificant, even though it is positioned in close proximity to the US. When Cuba allied the Soviet Union, though, the US sought its interest in the sphere of security and surrounded Cuba on all its waterfronts, aiming to pressure Fidel Castro from quitting on his plans to position nuclear missiles in the area and possibly stop the Cuban-Soviet alliance overall. What happened between the Athenians and the Melians, as well as between the US and the Cubans, is considered an example of the structure of international politics, somehow exerting pressure on the powerful city-states to take the action that they did against the weaker ones. If the Athenians didn't destroy the Melians after the Melians refused to join them, the Athenians would seem as being weak and won't be feared by others. If the US didn't surround Cuba, after Cuba having sided with the Soviets, beginning a missile program and creating such a security dilemma, the US would seem as being overpowered by the Soviets, and such a security dilemma arising from a small island would make the US the laughingstock of the world. Thus, as General Thucydides would say, the reason why men do cruel and evil things is not because they are cruel, but because the circumstances force them to do such things in order to survive, the same being applied to the states in the international sphere. In conclusion, Thucydides' work is really relevant for today's international politics, power politics, security dilemmas, human nature, interests, and the pressure of the international system on states will always exist and pose controversies in one way or another, and having General Thucydides' work to extract experience and know-how from will only be more and more relevant with time. General Thucydides' work, timelessness stems from the fact that he provides a reality perspective, and realism is still the dominant theory in international relations today, and also in politics. His writings on the history of the Peloponnesian War are not only to be viewed as a simply historical account of the occurrences, but as well a guide to what to do in case something similar happens again. Thank you guys for tuning in. See you next time!